The following is a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.
Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. It's your midweek fix for racing news and information. Brought to you by the Championship Racing Network. Now let's head trackside to join your hosts, Steve West and Matt Nicholson.
Welcome into episode number 2 of Crossed Flags. I'm Steve West. This is my partner, Matt Nicholson. Coming up in just a little while, we're going to actually introduce you. We mentioned her last week, but we're going to introduce you to our producer, Molly, because, well, it's an educational thing, number one. And number two, she knows a little bit about the last subject we're going to talk about, which happens to be NASCAR maybe going to Dodger Stadium? I don't know about that one.
Today will be the day you guys get to see my edgy side.
Yeah.
Let's say that.
We'll be on soapboxes pretty much for a lot of this show. In the middle, we're going to talk about a potential fourth manufacturer coming into NASCAR. NASCAR has been trying to do this really since Dodge left in 2012. We'll talk about which one, and we get mock-ups of what they might look like. Again, this is mock-ups. This isn't what they actually will look like because they haven't even said whether they're coming in yet or not. But first things first, we want to talk about, and this is going to be a multifaceted conversation, we want to talk about the company Andretti Global. And we'll be able to see the logo for these guys here in just a couple of moments. Andretti Global used to be Andretti Autosport. And this is owned, operated really by Michael Andretti. I mean, he's got partners, but Michael Andretti's the big man on campus, so to speak. And they're working on a pretty interesting deal. You may or may not have heard about the fact that they're trying to get into Formula One, right? They have, right now, a championship-winning IndyCar team. They are paired with Wayne Taylor Racing, and they've been champions in IMSA.
Yep.
Think Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona.
Yep.
They are the defending team champion in Formula E. They have an Extreme E team as well, which I have to admit I haven't kept up on how well they're doing over there.
I haven't either.
And by the way, if you don't know what Extreme E is, it is an all-electric series, but it's all off-road. So they're using mock-up SUVs, basically. But they want to get into Formula One, and they started to realize our current headquarters aren't quite as big as what we need to be. So they decided they were going to build a new headquarters. And just northeast of downtown Indianapolis, which is where they're based because IndyCar, they decided in Fishers to build a 575,000 square foot headquarters, which they say will cover all of their bases. And we're going to show you an artist rendition of what it should look like, give or take, once all is said and done. Probably not until mid-2025 at the earliest will they be able to move into a part of this facility.
Right.
Okay? By the time it's all said and done, probably 2026, truth be told, because, again, 575,000 square feet, you're not able to build this thing up that fast and then flesh it out and make it livable.
Right.
Okay? Take a look at this thing. I mean, this is a monster. And I have no doubt that it's probably going to look quite similar to what you're looking at right there.
When you look at it, it has, you know, with the water and the way the glass overlook is, it resembles the McLaren facility in London.
In a lot of ways. Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
But I saw it was as well, and this is smart placement, I guess you could say, by Michael Andretti and his team. They're next door to the Indianapolis Executive Airport.
Not bad at all.
So that's easy in, easy out
Sure.
for these high-profile executives coming in with private planes and everything.
Yeah.
But 575,000 square feet, that should easily cover what they need to cover, and then some.
And then some. All right. This will immediately house the IMSA team, the IndyCar team. This will be the base headquarters for Formula E. That's a world traveling series, so they'll probably have a facility somewhere over in Europe. I don't know how big that one's going to be. Probably the same thing for Extreme E because, again, kind of world traveling. But they're already stating we're going to have enough room in this facility to house our Formula One team. This will be their base in the United States. They said that they already plan on having something probably in England, which is where 7 of the 10 existing Formula One teams are. Mm-hmm. But yes, they would be headquartered right there in Fishers, Indiana. And suddenly they got to talking about NASCAR. Now, Matt and I, on our regular weekend show, Championship Racing Network, which you can check out at 8 to 10 a.m. Central Time on CRN Live on YouTube, we've been talking about this for a while. Let's talk about the NASCAR angle first. Mm-hmm. Because if they get into NASCAR, even if they get into co-owning it,
right,
they're going to have room to put some of these operations right there unless they become major owners. And the reason I say that is because most of your teams, not all, but most of the NASCAR teams are based in and around the Charlotte area. Mm-hmm. There's one notable exception. That's ThorSport Racing from the Craftsman Truck Series. They're based out of Sandusky, Ohio. And I believe it's Trackhouse Racing that's talking about building a headquarters outside of Nashville.
The way I understand that would be I guess you could say the business side headquarters, if you want to call it that. Mm-hmm. And then they would have their team aspect of it, where the cars and the mechanics and everybody would be at, still based at the Concord Regional Airport, where the old Chip Ganassi Racing headquarters is. That's the way I understand it.
Okay.
You've got, like you said, you've got ThorSport in Sandusky, Ohio. You've got Jeremy Clements, the Xfinity Series team, is in Greenville, South Carolina, Greenville, Spartanburg.
Which is, it's not that far in the grand scheme of things.
Take. Trying to think of who else. You got RSS Racing is still based in Georgia.
Okay.
In Tucker, Georgia. And those are really the only ones that I know of. Everybody else is within the Charlotte metropolitan area, whether it be northern or southern Charlotte.
Okay. Well, there are connections between Andretti Autosport right now and a team in NASCAR. And we've talked about this.
Correct.
And that team is Spire Motorsports. Spire Motorsports just bought out Kyle Busch Motorsports out of the Craftsman Truck Series, and they have moved lock, stock, and barrel into his old headquarters in the basically Charlotte area. We're just going to leave it at that. We could go into details, but it's just not worth it. But the main connection has been a sponsorship through a company that I want to say, 3-4 years ago, started sponsoring Andretti Autosport, Gainbridge Insurance.
Yeah.
And Gainbridge Insurance suddenly started getting all these subsidiary companies. And guess what? Those subsidiary companies are showing up on the Spire Motorsports NASCAR rides.
Gainbridge. You've got Delaware Life. You've got Group 1001. Those are your main 3. All 3 of them so far this year have shown up once, if not twice, within either the Craftsman Truck Series, almost said Camping,
it's tempting,
Craftsman Truck Series, or even the NASCAR Cup Series. They've showed up multiple times. So, and I will stick to my guns, and I will stand, and I will die on that hill. You cannot tell me that Andretti and Andretti Global are not already within the sport dabbling in it somehow, because the CEO of Gainbridge and the president and CEO of Gainbridge is also a major investor within Andretti Global. So you can't tell me they're not already there, 1. 2, look at the performance of 2 Cup cars in specific. The 77 car, which last year I could have ran faster than on foot.
Pretty much,
It was so slow.
No doubt about that.
Look how much the 77 cars picked up so far this year. The 7 car of Corey LaJoie, he has picked up, and he's more consistent as well as also.
Yep.
So there's something there to get that performance up that quick.
Yeah. And the Truck Series team is effectively still the Kyle Busch Motorsports team of last year, which means they have good infrastructure. They kept, really, I think, everybody.
To the way I understand it, everybody was kept.
So that explains the fact that they have pretty much come out dominating early this year already. So congratulations to them on that. And it does really look like Spire Motorsports has a good future here. But if you're Andretti Autosport, and Michael Andretti said, yes, we've got our eye on NASCAR, Formula One, which we're going to get back to, Formula One is their priority, but he was quoted as saying that if we do get into NASCAR, and we're looking at it, It's secondary on our priority list, but probably one of those deals where we wouldn't start our own team. We would come in as co-owners of an operation. Here it's laid out. Mm-hmm. It's laid out for them to partner up with Spire Motorsports.
Yep.
And that facility right there is going to be nice. But we go back to the Formula One aspect and stating that when this gets started, they've already sold their current headquarters, and the team that will be able to, that bought it, will be able to move in effectively January 1st of 2025. So they're building this in pieces and fleshing it out in pieces to allow them to have access and work out of this shop in the IMSA category, because the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona happens in late January. And then in early March, we're going to get into IndyCar time. So they're going to work on that part of it, and then they'll flesh out the rest of it later on. But that brings us back to something that you and I have had a conversation about when it comes to Andretti Autosport and them trying to get in to Formula One. It was about a year ago now that the FIA, the governing body of Formula One, opened things up and said, hey, we're thinking about maybe adding a couple of operations because most of the tracks that are out there can handle 12. Some of them can even handle 13 teams. So who's interested? File an application. Andretti Autosport, as they were known then, was one of them. They were the only one that was approved by the FIA. Then it had to go to Formula One management. Well, FOM, Formula One management, started hemming and hawing about the whole thing. Suddenly, Cadillac comes along. Cadillac, of course, is under the banner of General Motors, one of the biggest car companies on the planet. They say, hey, we're willing to come in and we're willing to join in on this Formula One effort with Andretti. Okay, now we've got a little bit more legitimacy to this particular thing, and it caused Formula One management to suddenly go, we have an opportunity to get General Motors into Formula One? As opposed to rubber stamping a no on the application, now all of a sudden they had to think about it. And they hemmed and they hawed and they hemmed and they hawed. And they started coming up with excuse after excuse. And you and I at that point in time were like, they're looking for a reason not to bring Andretti Autosport in.
Right.
And finally, it was about, 6 weeks ago now, I guess?
Roughly.
When they came out and stated to Andretti and basically to the world, we like what you've come up with the idea of GM and Cadillac, and when you guys have that set up, why don't you come back to us and talk to us about it? Because right now, we just don't think that you're going to bring enough value in for us to allow you in when you want to come in. And they were talking about coming in as early as 2025, next year. That's a little too ambitious. They maybe could have come in 2026 because they had a working handshake agreement with Renault under the Alpine banner to get the engines until GM and Cadillac were ready to bring out their own, which was for the 2028 season. Our problem with this, though, my biggest problem, I won't speak for Matt on this, my biggest problem with them refusing was that they wanted to make sure that Andretti was going to bring value. Well, we know that the GM mark does bring value. They've already said it. Formula One, the FIA, everybody, including a good number of the 10 teams that are in there, state having General Motors in there would be a great thing. But their biggest reason for saying, not right now, we don't think you can bring a 10% increase in the value to Formula One. 9 teams out of the 10 currently running in Formula One, I could argue, if you took them out for a year and then brought them back, wouldn't bring a 10% increase into the value of Formula One. The one exception that I would possibly give you, just because of the fact that they've been there since the beginning of Formula One and they've got such a major following, their fans are called the Tifosi.
Ferrari.
Be Ferrari. That's it. Not Mercedes, not McLaren, not Alpine/Renault, not Red Bull, even though they've won the last 3 championships for the driver and 2 for the Constructors' Cup. Certainly not their subsidiary we call VCARB. Not Haas F1. Not Aston Martin. Not Sauber. None of them. The only one that might bring a 10% increase would be Ferrari. So to me, that argument should be thrown right out the window.
I'm in full agreement with that because you can't tell me that arguably, let's use it this way, arguably one of the most recognized names in world motorsport. That's a very large encompass of motorsports in general.
Absolutely.
In world motorsport, that the name Andretti would not bring value to any one specific series.
And another thing to keep in mind on that is that Andretti already has a name within Formula One because Mario Andretti was a winner of races, multiple, in Formula One. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they're not familiar with the name Andretti and what it can do. So there's a big problem here that I've got. The biggest problem that I've got is the fact that they think that this is not going to help them in any way in the United States of America, that Netflix's Formula One Drive to Survive is going to continue to be this fantastic eye-getter for them. Well, I hate to tell you this. You've run 2 races so far this year. They ran Saturday morning, Saturday midday here in the United States because they were Saturday night races in the Middle East where they were run. But their viewership numbers are down this year.
Way down.
That's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is we here in the United States, sorry, Haas F1, we don't really have anybody to root for. I mean, yeah, you got the American-based team in Haas F1, and Williams has an American-born driver in Logan Sargent, but Logan Sargent is on right now what is a backmarker team. So that's not going to be a big deal either. You bring in Andretti Autosport, who has already said at least one of our drivers is going to be an American-born driver. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden, Americans have something to root for in Formula One, and they'll start paying more attention to it.
Agreed.
Because if nothing else, we love to root for somebody who's flying the American flag.
Because effectively the last 2 years, the Red Bull burnout is in full swing right now.
Good grief, it's huge. So Formula One, they're missing out on the opportunity to grow beyond what they are now. Yeah, you're making some headway here in the United States of America. You got COTA down in Austin, Texas. You got the Miami Grand Prix, which they're running on a parking lot outside of Hard Rock Stadium of the Miami Dolphins. And then you created a racetrack out of portions of the Las Vegas Strip out in Las Vegas. You got 3 races here. You're on the map here in America. But how many times have we seen where we get tired of the dynasty? Okay, we're just now coming out of the dynasty in the NFL known as the New England Patriots. How many people who are not fans of the New England Patriots were sick of hearing the New England Patriots win? Outside of the state of Alabama, where we are, how many people were sick and tired of the Alabama Crimson Tide winning national championship after national championship and being at or near the top of the rankings every year? This guy right here is an Auburn fan. I can tell you he is. And he lives in this state. Okay? You think of the dynasties that are out there, we celebrate them for a moment, and then we get sick of them really, really fast in the sports world.
That we do.
I honestly believe that their fear is that Andretti Autosport walks into this place and puts enough money to build that kind of facility and that kind of money behind the effort, and then gets a General Motors in there. So they get 2 years of getting their feet wet, so to speak, under an Alpine Renault motor, and then they get the GM motor and they have the body set up ready to go, and suddenly they start competing for wins. Mm-hmm. That's what I think they're afraid of.
Yeah. Coming in, I guess you could say the old adage of coming in and getting your thunder stolen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if anybody's capable of doing it,
Andretti is.
Them.
These guys are ready to do it. They have the infrastructure ready to go. That's something Haas F1 didn't.
Right.
Haas F1 had to build this thing up from scratch. Andretti Autosport knows where they're going with it, knows how to go about doing it. That's what Formula One's scared of. I dare Formula One to let Andretti Autosport in. I dare you. Because you're making a huge mistake. Just because you can get 1 million to 1.5 million people to watch your Formula One races here in the United States, and you can get 400,000 people doing a turnstile turn to attend a weekend in Texas, which, by the way, how many of them bought the weekend pass? Probably most of them.
Quite a few.
Okay, but that's all they count. They just count how many people over the course of a weekend hit the turnstile and walk through the gates to go in and watch the race. 400,000 people. That's the most of any race in Formula One's calendar. Think about that. More people go to a race in a weekend to COTA in Austin, Texas than any other race that Formula One runs in the year, right here in the U.S. But if you don't think you can get bigger, you're kidding yourself. NASCAR is doing it right now. If you look at the ratings, other than the Daytona 500, which was delayed a day because of rain, so it ran on Monday, and that's always kind of a downer, their ratings are up 15 to 20% across the board. Atlanta, Vegas, Phoenix. It's been a nice run for them.
Even the Monday race was up. I think
it was down a little from last year.
I think it was.
But last year's ran on Sunday when it was scheduled.
I think I can't remember.
You still got 6.6 million people watching the Daytona 500 on a delay on a Monday.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people, okay? And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We're running 3 makers right now. We're running Chevrolet, which has been there forever. Ford, been there forever. Toyota, which came in 2007? Seven.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Dodge came in 2001, stuck around for 11 years, and after the 2012 season, strangely enough, after they claimed their first and only title under the new year, under their new Dodge banner, they bolted. So 2001 to 2012, Brad Keselowski wins the championship in 2012, and Dodge says bye. And ever since then, NASCAR has been trying to get a 4th manufacturer to come in to the series. Dodge has been one of those situations where it's been weird because they have gone from being co-owned with Mercedes, and then they were bought out by a company called Cerberus, which, look that up. I'm not even going to get into it. And then you start talking about the fact that they got bought out by Fiat, and now Fiat's combined forces with the company that owned Peugeot, which they don't even operate here in the United States anymore. So they're owned under a company called Stellantis. Well, Stellantis wants to try and figure out what they're going to do with the direction of Chrysler, which right now only has 1 model, now that the 300 is effectively gone?
2.
2 models, okay.
2.
And Dodge is apparently switching to a combination electric vehicle, no V8s. They're getting ready to reintroduce a Challenger, which looks like what you saw in the Dukes of Hazzard in some ways. It's going to have a twin-turbo V6 and then an electric version. We make comments about that all day long. So Stellantis, not knowing the direction that they're going to go with when it comes to the Dodge or Chrysler brands, they're out. So you and I got to thinking about who are the options. NASCAR is going to look at the car companies that have cars and pickup trucks. So there's several out there that don't fit the bill. Think Mazda, for example. But since Toyota's in, we started looking at Japan. 2 fit the bill over there. One is Nissan, and Nissan's already involved in motorsport. Think endurance racing. The other's Honda, and Honda's also involved in racing, both in Formula One and IndyCar. They supply engines for IndyCar, and they also supply engines in Formula One. Which one makes more sense? Well, we haven't heard a whiff when it comes to Nissan. But the funny thing is, NASCAR admitted they're talking to Honda. So going around and looking out online, there's an Accord mock-up of what it might look like in Gen 7 form. Okay. Now, granted, you can see the 22 on the side. That means that this mock-up came out in the year 2022. And the way that I kind of figure that they might do it, and I know that Ford is using the Mustang plate in both Cup Series and Xfinity. And I also know that they're using the Camaro in both Cup Series and Xfinity for Chevrolet. But if you take the Toyota page, where they're using the Camry XSE name in Cup and they're using the Super name in Xfinity Series, could you do this Honda Accord in the Cup Series and then go to the next picture that we're going to show you and run a Civic in the Xfinity Series? Which would look ish, something like that maybe. Now that's a Cup Series mock-up. Again, this is that Gen 7 kind of look there. I can't find a Ridgeline mock-up. And Matt and I have both looked. So we have no idea what a Honda Ridgeline pickup truck might look like in Craftsman Truck Series form.
Personally, I don't know if I want to see one. I don't know if I want to see one.
But here's the thing. If you're coming into the sport, why wouldn't you jump in with both feet and do all 3?
True.
It just makes more sense.
It does make sense. And I've always said, to me, the most logical choice would be Nissan.
It does.
Because the Nissan, you got the Nissan Titan, you got the Nissan Altima, and the Nissan Sentra.
Or the Nissan Maxima, then Altima. I mean, they've got a number of different cars that you could use, and then you got the Titan pickup truck. But right now, Honda seems to be the one that NASCAR's talking about. Will they come in? I don't know. It doesn't bother me, the idea of Honda coming in. It wouldn't bother me if Nissan came in. Heck, bring them both in. I'd be happy for that. I mean, we have seen it to the point, if you go back to this, when I was really getting into this sport, and he's younger than I am. What do you want? We're not even going to talk about Molly. She doesn't remember Oldsmobile. We'll bring her in a minute. Woo! But I remember when it was Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, and Buick from General Motors competing. And then you had Ford and Mercury from the Ford banner. And then they would bring in Plymouth and Dodge. I mean, that's just 3 car companies, and we're already talking about 8 car makes. Okay? It's not unfeasible. It's not out of the realm of possibility to do this.
Let's just say the fields back in the late 80s, early 90s at Talladega, it would be like brands. It would be like a roster of cars from a used car lot. You see Buick, Dodge, Oldsmobile, Chevrolet, Pontiac, Ford, Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about this being an opportunity, because if there's one thing that we know, NASCAR fans are loyal to a brand.
They are.
And it could be a car brand. It could be the sponsor that's on the hood. Okay? I became a fan of Tony Stewart his rookie year in 1999. Who was he sponsored by in 1999? Home Depot. Where do you think I do the vast majority of my shopping for things that I need to do at the house still to this day? We're loyal to a fault. Honda knows that. Honda's seen it. That's why Honda's thinking about coming in. That's why Nissan should think about it. And any other company that has a pickup truck or is thinking about building a pickup truck ought to think about going into NASCAR as well. Wouldn't bother me a bit. That's the look. That's the Civic. We showed you the Accord. I get the funny feeling the Accord, because it's just the natural rival to the Camry.
Yeah, it makes the most logical sense.
So I get the funny feeling that one would be the one that would come in. As to whether or not they would keep the Accord or whether they go to the Civic or some other model, don't know, for the Xfinity series.
As the old saying goes, time will tell.
But we do know this. There's one sizable, pretty notable NASCAR team that currently has a contract, but they're in their last year with that manufacturer. It is
Stewart-Haas Racing.
Final year with Ford, at least under contract, and we haven't heard word one about an extension talk or Stewart-Haas Racing saying, you know what, we're ready to go someplace else.
Honestly, I think the writing's already on the wall.
I think it is too. Because
when you take a team, as in Front Row Motorsports, that has been a mid-tier Ford team since its inception, if not a low tier, now all of a sudden in 2024 they are tier 1, and Stewart-Haas is still nowhere to be found.
Yeah. I think Ford has already pretty much set this up that, you know what, we think Stewart-Haas Racing is gone. We're going to put our eggs over here in these baskets over here. So we'll find out. That would be a big coup for Stewart-Haas Racing to come in and Honda to come in and have Stewart-Haas Racing as their first client. That'd be huge.
I would agree.
Will it happen?
I would agree.
Don't know. We don't know. We've heard some other rumors about that. We'll deal with that at a later time. Now we want to deal with this. You and I have been highly, highly critical of this, okay? And I call it the LA Mausoleum because it's just not that impressive of a facility. But it's a football facility. Granted, they've hosted Olympics. They've hosted 2 Olympics in Los Angeles, and both of them were based out of the LA Mausoleum, the LA Coliseum. The thing about the LA Coliseum is that NASCAR went out and they spent a whole lot of money to rip up the turf and lay down a 1/4-mile temporary racetrack, and then have to spend a whole lot more money to rip up that temporary racetrack and give the USC Trojans, who play all their games in the LA Coliseum, new sod.
Yeah.
They say they're committed to Southern California. Okay, fine. You've got a facility in Southern California. It's called Auto Club Speedway, or was in Fontana, California. But you sold off a lot of the property. So what had been a 2-mile track is now going to become approximately a half to a 3/4 mile track.
Right.
Which they say will be some combination of Richmond, Bristol, and or Martinsville.
Yep.
But being California, that's another story entirely, and I'm not going to get into the politics of it because that's not this show. But being California and all of that, oh man, there are just delay after delay after delay after delay. So it's not going to be ready for 2025. So now they're talking about, well, maybe we're done with the Coliseum. Where else could we go? What about this place right here? I present to you a place that they call Chavez Ravine or Dodger Stadium in the Los Angeles area. And this is where we're going to bring our producer in and fully introduce you to one young Molly Robinson. Because Molly works on WJOX. She's on the midday show, 3-man front. If you've missed it, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., feel free to welcome in to our show Molly Robinson, who, again, a pretty vast general sports working knowledge. You and I haven't had the chance to sit down and figure out what it is that you do and do not know. What we do know is that you're not really all that familiar with racing.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty new to all of this, but happy to be here, though.
Yeah, this will be the education of young Molly.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to that, and we'll get deeper into that in some later time. But you know a little bit about this facility here. And let's start with what you do know about this particular location and the facility here. As you look at it, you see probably exactly what we see.
Yeah.
It's a baseball stadium.
It is.
Can you see anything else out of this? I mean, can you visually come up with anything?
I don't even know how you would set that up. And again, like I come from very little racing knowledge, but it just seems so small.
And especially the way that the field is set up, that's going to be really hard to put a racetrack in. I mean, I get where you can kind of do it out of the LA Coliseum because you can make an oval out of that. I've seen one mock-up, and there's one unusually shaped racetrack that they put in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania called the Tricky Triangle. And it's shaped like a triangle. That's the only way I could figure you could make a racetrack out of this is to create a mini Pocono. And I don't think I want that.
I'm going to tell you now, and I'll say it sitting right here between the both of you. It's impossible. It's impossible.
So where are they thinking about putting it then?
There's been
Great question.
two talks.
Thank you.
And the first talk would be you have to do exactly what you were doing with the LA Coliseum, which is rip up all the turf and lay down a temporary track, which of course means then you would have to go back, rip up the temporary track, and give the LA Dodgers brand new grass, which Southern California, yeah, you can make grass grow pretty much at any time of the year. That's not the biggest concern. My concern is the amount of money that you're going to spend to rip that all up, place a temporary track down, then have to rip that temporary track up and put new sod down for the team.
Yeah.
Because the team's not going to do it. The team is going to say, you want to run a race in our facility, we'll rent you the facility, you got to give us the new stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't even know how that would work. Really?
So here comes the second question. We got a street course race for NASCAR in the first time just last year in Chicago. We've seen Formula One run street courses, and they're running on a parking lot. We mentioned it earlier on in the show. Hard Rock Stadium in Miami.
Yep.
They made a course out of the parking lot. Did you make a course out of that parking lot and let NASCAR run on it? At least you got more room.
You've got a lot of room. Yes, you absolutely have the room to do it. But how, on the creation of this Mother Earth, would you have a race that would be even worth watching?
I don't see it.
And we've got local short track asphalt racers that are in the Birmingham area, a ton of them.
Sure.
They'll know what I mean by when I say these two words. Kern County, Irwindale.
They're both in the Los Angeles area.
You've got two perfectly good short tracks. You take that and this is the number that we heard that was invested in LA Coliseum, $50 million. $50 million.
Wow.
Let's give you a basic idea of what $50 million means. $50 million was invested in Talladega Superspeedway a few years ago and recreated the entire infield with Big Bill's garage and created a tunnel that can be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week under turn 3. That's what $50 million can do. And instead they're using it to build a temporary racetrack in a football stadium?
You could take $50 million and take the likes of Kern County or Urbandale and make a superb facility.
Yeah. If you're that
Very
committed to
superb.
Southern California. So you, as a person who's just now starting to get into racing, let's presume that this suddenly becomes a racetrack, and it doesn't matter whether it's on the baseball field that you see there or in the parking lot. How much would that intrigue you?
I mean, it would be pretty cool because it's something that I have never really seen before. But when you first told me about the idea of having a race at Dodger Stadium, I thought it was going to be in the parking lot. I didn't think it was going to be in the actual stadium.
Yeah. If
That's just mind-boggling to me.
But if you're not a racing fan, we are. If you're not a committed racing fan and they go race in there or in the parking lot, and that becomes boring to you, what's the chances you're coming back?
0.
Yeah.
Not very high.
No.
0.
NASCAR, you got a problem. This needs to be on a racetrack. If you're committed to Southern California, go talk to Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick now has his name on one of those 2 tracks that we just talked about, Kern County. The literal name of it now is Kevin Harvick's Kern County Speedway. Go talk to Kevin. He'd be more than happy to take some of the money that you guys got and you're willing to put into something like this on a temporary basis and really make a world-class facility for you guys to race on. Stop doing this stuff. Stop throwing good money down the drain for temporary courses. We work for NASCAR. Every single race since 2007, I have been in the tower as a PA announcer at Talladega Superspeedway. This guy right here has been a PA announcer, and he is the current scoreboard keeper for Talladega Superspeedway. We are technically employees of NASCAR. We're begging our bosses, don't do this. This is a bad idea.
Extremely.
Please don't do this.
I would rather see them go to Mexico City or north of the border to run, if they've got to have the Clash race, take it somewhere north of the border or south of the border instead of trying to manipulate a stadium.
Yeah. And the thing about the Busch Light Clash that we know, they want to run it to begin the season even before the Daytona 500. Canada's not going to be the place you're going to go.
Yep.
Invest the money to have the security to make sure that you can get through to Mexico City safely because they're going to do it by truck. Take that money and use it for that. Don't do this.
Nope.
We beg of you. We beg of you. And Formula One, wake up, smell the coffee, bring Andretti Global in, would you?
Yep.
That's our 2 main points. Honda, if you want to come in, we welcome you. Nissan, you too. Whatever other car company. Stellantis, wake up. We'd like to see Dodge back. I know a lot of people would like to see Dodge back.
What are you talking about?
You want to talk about one of the more popular moves? Bring Dodge back. That's our soapbox for this week.
Yep.
I'm Steve West. This is Matt Nicholson. Molly, thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. That was
you will
fun.
continue to be bigger parts of the show as we go along here because, hey, we got to educate her.
That is true.
All right. Y'all, thank you very much for checking us out here. Join us again next week for the next edition of Crossed Flags.
You've been listening to Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. For more content like this, subscribe to CRN Live on YouTube, and you'll be set to catch the 2-hour live show every Saturday morning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central.
This has been a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.